$1 billion spend on housing, the centrepiece of last night's budget. Coles ramps up the use of drones to deliver supermarket items to customers. And a new report says that kids who game for more than 3 hours a day have better memories and impulse control. It's Wednesday, the 26th of October, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. A little weary this morning.
Oh, it's a big night, isn't it? And how lucky are we? 2 budgets in 1 year.
Yes, 2 budgets in a year. I mean, how much fun can those economists have?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there is a limit to how much fun a group of economists can have.
So I'm just trying to work this out. There must be, is it 5 rate rises so far? No, more than that. 6 rate rises so far, 2 budgets. It's kind of like a absolute cracker year, 2022.
It's a bonanza. Yes, I think is the technical term. We have a lot to talk about, Sean. Plenty of budget stuff to discuss, but I just very quickly have to mention that there is a new episode of our other podcast, How Do They Afford That, out today. In a case of really what is superb timing, we are also looking at budgets in this episode. However, this is the household budget, and we've got some really kind of clever, effective ways to organise your money. That's How Do They Afford That with me and with Canna Campbell, probably more importantly, from Sugar Mama TV, wherever you listen to podcasts, or there is a link in today's show notes. The other big budget that we are discussing is, of course, last night's federal budget. You have a fantastic chat coming up after the show with Gareth Aird, Head of Australian Economics at Commonwealth Bank. It is great to hear Gareth's take on it because he is one of the best communicators in the business. That's coming up later on. But Sean, I need to get your take on all of this because there was a lot in the budget with Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers last night. And it seemed to kind of fulfill the job of costing out election promises, but it also included a massive spend on affordable housing, a downgrade in economic forecasts, but little on cybersecurity.
It's a pretty good rap, Michael. You've been reading websites, haven't you?
I watched the budget speech. I watch it every time, and I take notes. I take detailed notes,
Really?
And I feel like I've just passed an exam by getting your approval.
I'm always so busy. I have never seen one. In all honesty, I have never watched the Treasurer give his speech.
Oh, really? Well, I watch it every time, and it is. I force everyone in the household to watch it with me, so I'm not very popular.
Dr. Chalmers called it a budget that provides cost of living relief, but not reckless relief, investment for a stronger economy, and starts on the job of repairing the budget. First to the housing package, the government outlined an ambitious plan to build 1 million well-located homes. I like that phrase, well-located homes, in 5 years from 2024 as part of a national housing accord with states and territories. There is money from both Canberra and state governments. The states and territories will free up land, and the government will work with superannuation funds and other institutional investors to put money into social and affordable housing. So the spend there isn't just on homes, it's actually on incentives for other people to build homes.
So on the spending side, where is all the money going?
There are 5 really big spending segments of the budget: aged care, healthcare, defence, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and increasingly the interest bill on the national debt. In fact, the NDIS and the national debt interest bill are the 2 that are rising fast in terms of new spend. Mostly last night was about costing election promises. The government will spend $5 billion to improve access to childcare subsidies over the next 4 years. It will extend Commonwealth-funded paid parental leave from 18 weeks to 26 weeks. The NDIS will cost more. There's nearly $10 billion more for infrastructure projects around the country. Most of those have been announced. Also, prescription medicines will drop in price from $42.50 to $30. There's also $33 billion in extra welfare payments over the next 4 years. That's on the back of inflation-linked pensions and social service payments. The government's also outlined plans to create an extra 20,000 subsidised university spots and 465,000 free TAFE and vocational care spots, particularly in industries hit hardest by the coronavirus pandemic. I love that last one. Universities and TAFE spots, more of it.
And looking ahead, Sean, what does Treasury think about the outlook for the economy?
It ain't too hot, really. The Department of Treasury has sharply downgraded its economic forecast. While this financial year is expected to expand by about 3.25%, the 2024 financial year is forecast to grow by only 1.5%. Inflation is tipped to hit, well, getting close to 8% later this year before falling back to 3.5% through the next financial year. The budget deficit this financial year is expected to come in at $37 billion. That's actually the good news. It was expected to be $78 billion in the March budget. The thing about this slowdown in growth that we're talking about, which people are worried about, may not be the worst thing in the world if you want to get inflation under control.
All right. Where's the rub? What are the stingers, maybe the soothers in all of this?
Probably the big one is the forecast that energy costs will rise by 20% in the first half of next year and then 30% the following year. Dr. Chalmers blamed the Ukraine war on that one. The whole concept of reducing the cost of energy by $275, which was one of those election promises, I think that's dead in the water. As previously announced, there's also $20 billion for the Rewiring the Nation plan. Now, part of that is to reduce taxes on electric cars and provide battery storage for up to 100,000 homes. So if you are going to buy an EV, that's probably good news. The government will also implement the Respect at Work report, which focuses on gender-based issues. And, of course, there's money for the new independent National Anti-Corruption Commission. But, Michael, given what we've been talking about for the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, barely a cent. I think it's 12 million in total. Barely a cent for cyber security. Big miss as far as I am concerned.
Yeah, considering the size of the problem, that's a drop in the ocean. All right. How did the local share market perform yesterday, Sean?
Not bad at all, really. The S&P ASX 200 held on to the big gains of Monday, finishing yesterday up 0.3% to almost 6,800 points, just a point off that. That's the best close in about 3 weeks. The real estate investment trusts and telcos led the way, while the energy and materials sectors lost ground. The banks were good yesterday. Macquarie Group rose more than 2%, while Commonwealth Bank and National Australia Bank both finished 1% higher. Telstra was up 1.6%, industrial property giant Goodman Group about the same, and gaming machine maker Aristocrat Leisure, it was nearly 2% higher. Fortescue Metals was the worst for the large caps, down 3%, while BHP, Rio Tinto, South32 and Newcrest Mining, all the big miners, fell more than 1%.
I know you love a good question without notice, Sean.
Yes.
I'm just curious, obviously with the budget last night, when you talk about, say, an election, markets are obviously very kind of hesitant and a bit skittish around an election. Is there the same kind of apprehension around the release of a budget for financial markets?
It depends on a lot of the stuff from last night was really well telegraphed. So perhaps not, but sometimes, there were some big super changes quite a few years back, which made a big difference to some of the financial stocks the next day. The housing stuff from last night, that will, potentially could help the banks or the opposite. So some of those sort of policy decisions which do impact some of these companies can affect the share price. But generally, it's been pretty well telegraphed. So it's not kind of like an election.
Okay. All right. What about international markets? What's been happening?
Chinese tech stocks in the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong rebounded somewhat yesterday after they were absolutely smashed on Monday. Now, that followed the close of the National People's Congress in Beijing. The Hang Seng hit a new 13-year low on Monday, with investors fearing market-unfriendly policies from President Xi Jinping, who, of course, had been reappointed for a third term. Asia really is where the equity action has been in the last 48 hours or so. There hasn't been a lot of movement in global commodity markets over the past couple of days. The Aussie dollar is steady also, buying 63.2 US cents.
All right. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Medibank yesterday conceded that the cyber attack affecting customers is wider than originally thought, and data was stolen from its main brand as well as its subsidiary AHM and international students.
The stolen data includes customers' names, addresses, contact information, claims information, and birth dates. And yesterday, Medibank said the number of affected customers will grow. The group has about 3.8 million customers nationally. The health insurer said it had received a file of 1,000 further policy records from cyber criminals, having received 100 last week. Now, the criminal behind the Medibank data hack purchased login credentials to gain access to the network from an online Russian criminal forum and did extensive reconnaissance before actually collecting the data, according to media reports. The original breach, though, was probably a phishing scam that caught a senior Medicare employee out. Medibank has delayed premium rises and set up a 24/7 hotline for victims in response. Cybersecurity Minister Claire O'Neil, who has been very busy in recent weeks, likened the Medibank hack to COVID-19, called cyber criminals the dogs of the 21st century, and activated something called the National Coordination Mechanism, which aims to help the government and Medibank work closely together on the cyber breach.
Sean, in the same realm, really, a scammer tried to steal credit card details of attendees at a virtual event hosted by the Australian Institute of Company Directors. There's a little bit of irony kind of around this because it was actually an event about cybersecurity.
It was. The event didn't actually go on. It was a webinar that was hosted on LinkedIn. Eventually it was cancelled due to technical issues, but there are about 4,800 people registered for the event, which is massive. About 2,500 had logged on to the platform. While people were waiting, links were posted in the comment sector of the platform asking participants to click on a link that pushed them through to a request for credit card details. Now, the links weren't genuine, and it's unknown whether any participants actually entered their details. Very opportunistic, but just shows how prevalent cybercrime is.
Do you reckon there was any kind of temptation on behalf of the Australian Institute of Company Directors just to go, hey, well, just testing you guys, just seeing if anyone would click on it?
Maybe. I think it's very serious. I mean, the Institute of Company Directors is really the peak governance body in the country, or one of the two peak governance bodies in the country. Yeah. And so you could imagine they'd be horrified about this.
Trying to say they don't have a sense of humour about this kind of thing.
They'll probably take this a little bit more seriously, Michael, than you do.
All right, understood. Now, Sean, Green Senator Lydia Thorpe, who was dating a former bikie leader while part of the Joint Committee on Law Enforcement looking into bikie gangs, yesterday told the Senate she will not resign.
That's right. She briefly dated the bikie, Dean Martin, and any information she received in Parliament was treated with confidence, Senator Thorpe said. She did concede yesterday that she should have disclosed the relationship to her boss, Greens leader Adam Bandt, but finished by saying she wasn't going anywhere. Now, Senator Thorpe has been referred to the Senate Privileges Committee, so we'll hear much more about it.
Sean, total wine exports fell by 11% to $2 billion in the 12 months to the end of September. And the reason? China.
Yeah, one word. That'll do it. The figures from Wine Australia show that just $21 million worth of wine was sent to China in the 12 months to the end of September. 3 years ago, that was around $1.3 billion worth of wine. It just shows how the punitive tariffs and the local drop have killed that market. There was also a sharp drop in sales to the UK because people went back to pubs and restaurants in the UK post-COVID, and most Aussie wine is actually drunk at home. The good news is that exports are only down 11%, given we don't really sell to China anymore. US consumers are finally starting to better appreciate our wine, Michael, with sales up 5% to more than $400 million. There was also a big jump in sales to Thailand and Malaysia.
Now, Sean, we have talked in the past about the fact that I don't like to leave home for any reason whatsoever, whether it's to go to work or go to the shops or anything. So it feels like this next story is kind of directed at me, or anyone who might want a loaf of bread and just can't be bothered going to the supermarket. Coles might be coming to the rescue here, expanding its drone delivery service into southeast Queensland.
Yeah, so Coles is using Google's drone delivery service, known as Wing, W-I-N-G, to pilot door-to-door drone delivery. You buy a loaf of bread via the Wing app. Next thing you know, it's at your door. Now, Coles calls it store-to-door. This is you, Michael, all over.
I just picture it at the door. Maybe it's on the roof. You never actually know. It just you just hear this thud. You go, oh, I've now got to find my bread.
There's about 500 items available. Bread's one of them. Convenience meals, fresh produce, right through to healthcare items and household essentials. Now, they're in trial areas at the moment. There's been a pilot program in Canberra, now in Queensland. Can we get it to the southern suburbs of Sydney? Maybe we need a campaign for you, Michael.
Oh, yes, please. Now, Ampol's share price tumbled more than 11% yesterday after warning of weakening business conditions.
Chief Executive Matt Halliday said he expected further volatility in the market, and he highlighted the recently announced increase in Chinese export quotas. The refiner and retailer still expects a bumper profit this financial year, with pre-tax earnings for the 9 months to December coming in at $1 billion. How big is that? Well, it's about twice as much as it was a year earlier. Ampol's Lytton Oil Refinery is one of only two left in Australia, along with Viva Energy's Geelong plant.
Now, how about this one? New South Wales will give landowners $200,000 for every kilometre of land over which they allow transmission lines to be installed in an effort to bolster the state's transmission infrastructure.
One of the big challenges getting more renewables into the grid is actually transmission infrastructure. There just isn't enough of it, and mostly it's in the wrong place. So New South Wales Treasurer Matt Keane said the landowners would be paid in annual instalments over 20 years, CPI indexed, and it will apply to new major transmission projects deemed critical to the energy transformation. $200,000 for every kilometre. At the moment, they get paid about half that, about $100,000 for every kilometre. So it's a big, big incentive. Mr. Keane also announced $360 million to encourage heavy industries, think steel, cement, chemicals, to decarbonise.
Okay, moving on to overseas news now, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers has congratulated Rishi Sunak on winning the contest to become the UK's new Prime Minister.
Dr. Chalmers said Mr. Sunak's win, after previously losing to Liz Truss for the Prime Ministership, showed his commitment and persistence. He also called him a friend of Australia and noted that it was not insignificant that the UK now had its first non-white Prime Minister. Mr. Sunak got the job after the other two contenders, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Penny Mordaunt, dropped out. He's the third British Prime Minister in 3 months and the youngest PM in modern times. Michael, he's also very rich. His family wealth is put at about £700 million. That's about 1.3 billion Aussie. He made money himself in banking. He then married the daughter of the Infosys founder. And that's kind of why he has so much money.
Wow, that is extraordinary wealth.
It is. In fact, the funny little comment that they've been talking about in the UK is he's actually richer than King Charles III. King Charles III's wealth is put at £370 million, and Mr. Sunak's at £700 million. First time a Prime Minister's been richer than the King.
Yeah, it seems there's a lot of questions and commentary over whether does this make him out of touch with kind of a cost of living crisis, or does it make him a good manager of money? So it kind of goes both ways, and we will see in coming weeks and months, I suppose.
We will.
Now, Sean, Apple has increased prices for its music and TV services for the first time as the tech media industry looks to raise revenue.
The tech giant upped the price by 10%, effective immediately in the US, blaming higher licensing costs. It means Apple's streaming service is more expensive than Spotify and Amazon, but the video plan, Apple Plus, continues to be cheaper than Netflix or Warner Brothers Discovery. Services, rather than products like iPhones, now provide about 25% of Apple's revenue, up from less than 10% 8 years ago. And Apple, along with others like Disney, like Foxtel in Australia, all see increasing the price of those subscription services as a way to increase revenue.
All right, finally, Sean, a story that I reckon parents probably don't really want to hear. Kids who play 3 hours or more of video games a day perform better on tests of memory and impulse control than those who don't, according to a new study.
Yes, so frequent gamers showed more activity and higher blood oxygen levels in frontal brain regions associated with more cognitively demanding tasks, and less brain activity in regions related to vision, according to this study. Now, it's a US study, peer-reviewed, about 2,000 children, so it's a serious study. Now, the performance could be related to the games, but scientists just sort of stopped short of saying there was a cause and effect relationship. The kids who perform better on those tests may be the ones who actually choose to play games in the first place, they said. Guidelines set by the American Association of Pediatrics still encourages limits of 1 or 2 hours of video games per day, whereas in China, kids aren't permitted to play more than 3 hours a week.
Really? I didn't actually realise that there was 1 to 2 hours of video games per day based on the American Association. That's actually still quite a bit.
Yeah, it sure is.
Goodness. Okay. Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview, and today you're speaking with Gareth Aird from Commonwealth Bank.
Yep, all about last night's budget. Gareth, as always, has plenty to say and is definitely well worth listening to.
Sure is. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 26th of October, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, today there is a new episode of our other podcast, How Do They Afford That? Featuring Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV. Today, it is all about budgeting in the household. It is well worth a listen. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.